Hello everyone. I wanted to hop on and kind of walk you through the modernist period, especially in terms of literature, and then some specifics about Southern Gothic literature, because you're going to use this information to write your last essay for this course. And if it's been a while since you've taken a literature course, especially American literature, some of these concepts will be very foreign, or if you've never had an American literature course, it's going to be very new to you. So, in general, the modernist period typically is seen as happening from 1915 to 1945. And if you know much about history, especially in Western history, this is a very dynamic, changing time. Not only in Britain did the Victorian period just end, which caused a lot of upheaval. And yes, this is American literature, but those things filter over to America very easily, especially at the beginning of this period. So we lose that stable monarchy, the British Empire is ending, but then also in this period you've probably heard of World War One. So that's going on, and so there's a lot of changes happening that's causing everyone in Western civilization, especially Western Europe slash like America kind of conglomerate, to question everything. It is an initial response to World War One. We feel like everything is just breaking down socially and historically. The way we've been doing things isn't working, and it's led us to this horrible event that should have never happened. It hopefully will never happen again. So we're all kind of like having this backlash towards traditions. So we're breaking with traditions completely, and we're going to see society break down and feel fragmented. However, in America, there's other things happening during this time period that make it even worse. We have the Dust Bowl, so crops aren't growing, soil is going away, no one's having any rain, so there's a massive drought. We have dust pneumonia, so people are getting sick and dying because they have so much dust being blown to their lungs. We have the Great Depression that hits during this period. So yes, in the Roaring 20s, things might feel great for some, but like there's a lot going on, and people just feel like nothing makes sense anymore. And so we are kind of lashing back against it. And as this quote says, modernism is the struggle to find reason in a time of chaos and deterioration of culture. So our traditions, our cultures, our way of thinking, they just feel completely torn apart, and they feel like they've disintegrated. And so now they are turning and looking for other meaning elsewhere, and they start thinking also about what is the purpose of literature or poetry or even just existing. And we're going to see that if you were to study heavily modernist writings, you would see that in everything, just a constant questioning of like, why? And like, how is this working, and what does anything matter anymore? So in this period, there are a few key themes that I want to review with you. Not all of these we'll see in our short story, but they kind of help give you an idea of what's going on in the period, and you will need to choose one of these for your essay. So one big issue or theme that we see repeated throughout literature and art is this idea of alienation from society and or loneliness. So not only are you lonely, but you as a person are completely alienated from society. And sometimes it's that society has alienated you, or you have done it to yourself, but there's a connection, there's no connection anymore, that you are just kind of operating in different realms. You also will see procrastination, which is kind of similar to this next part, or an inability to act. Sometimes it's not that they're not actively procrastinating, it's that they just physically are unable to act. They can't do what they need to do. There's something stopping them, which would make sense for this period because things are chaotic, they're out of control, and we feel unable to respond. There's an agonized recollection of the past, so like we're recalling and remembering and appreciating the past, but it's also agonized because things are bad now and things have fallen apart and the past failed us. There's the idea of the fear of death or the appearance of death. So obsession with death, it's everywhere. We both fear it, but yet we also see it. What does that mean? How does that impact us? The inability to feel love or the inability to express love. That's pretty straightforward, but we can't, like the good emotions, the love for humanity or for others have just gone because we've self-imploded on this. The world is going to feel like a wasteland if you think about the Dust Bowl, the after effects of World War One, and then later World War Two, from the gas attacks and everything and trench warfare. Like the world has just become a wasteland. And then finally, man created myths. So this idea of we no longer have religion to give us the purpose of life and that we can fall back on for meaning. And so mankind, humans, are going to create their own myths to follow, which means we now have lots of different beliefs and ways of going instead of one united society that we've kind of been up until this point with some variations. But in general, there's been a lot of like mainstream beliefs that people could at least fall back on. And during the modernist period, after World War I, that's no longer the case. Everything is kind of self-imploded. A small realm of modernism would be the Southern Gothic. Southern Gothic is specifically an American literary movement. It is rooted in British Romantic literature and British Gothic literature. So you have the Romantic period in Britain, which is when Gothic literature first is developed. It's going to be emotionally rich. It's going to be hyper-aware. It's going to be obsessed with isolation and decay. So when you think of Gothic literature, traditional Gothic literature with damsels in distress, mysterious castles, supernatural, those kind of things, it's going to have that feeling. It's just going to be a little bit twisted, and it's going to fit more for the American South. It is applied to that southern region of the USA, so this CCCC is in the South, so you've probably been familiar with the South's history if you've grown up around here, but it's really going to focus on that as a setting and just take Gothic literature and twist it to fit. It is used in general as a commentary on the antebellum South's decline. It's not always directly about that or explicitly about that, but it is kind of the focus and discussion for them as they go. They are really fascinated with the grotesque and macabre, and so you'll see that included. That varies. Like in one short story, it's someone who is going around stealing people's body parts, not like cutting them off, but like prosthetics. Sometimes it's just death everywhere and like actual decay. It just kind of depends. However, this is one of those literary movements where there is meaning everywhere. The authors choose things for a purpose, and you need to pay close attention because a detail is not included just to include it. They end up tying in together in ways that we may not expect. So just be aware that this is a highly symbolic literary movement that is focusing on using Gothic traditions and twisting them to have commentary about the decay of the South in the USA. So there are some elements that I'm going to run you through. What you're going to have to do is choose 3, maybe 4 of these elements and tell me how they support a modernist theme for your essay. So I've already shown you those modernist themes earlier. Now these are the elements that could exist. Not all of these are in our short story, but you will see a lot of them, and I want you to think about them. The first one is symbolism and imagery. Southern Gothic writers are full of symbolism. They use imagery to their advantage. And those creepy aspects, those creepy images are going to have symbolic meanings. So the idea of, in the Cask of Amontillado, we're in the catacombs, but what do the catacombs represent? It's not just a physical location. It's also like the mental trap of his mind and being lost and insanity, that kind of thing. You also will see the idea of destitution and decay, as I've already indicated. That decay can look at racism, the patriarchal society, slavery, anything related to Southern values pre and right after the Civil War. You might see a lot of poverty or disrepair as they're dealing with like this change in society as well. Next up would be innocence and corruption. So obviously morality is going to be something we're struggling with in a post-World War I society, but we'll really see that in Southern Gothic literature. But corruption may not be that an individual corrupted society, so like a corrupt king. It could be that society has done something to an individual that has corrupted them, that has turned them bad. It could be that maybe the family caused the corruption. It could be the town that caused corruption. It could be the rules of society. It can be that inversion of society being a negative influence instead of vice versa that we would traditionally see in Gothic literature, where someone would try to corrupt others. It's flopped. Violence and crime. It kind of makes sense, especially because it ties together really well with innocence and corruption. But someone might turn from innocent into a life of crime. It may be good versus evil, but crime is going to be a key aspect in some way. It's going to drive the plot, or it's going to do something to somebody and help them decay further. The outsider, this is pretty straightforward. It's someone who doesn't fall into the social norm. It could be ethnic backgrounds, mental disabilities, sexual orientation, just being socially deviant in some way, not bad, but just like different. It could be being from the North. But when you look at the story, you want to look at how are they treated, how do they treat others, and explore that idea. So if you've read To Kill a Mockingbird, think about Boo Radley, where he's like relatively innocent, but he's quirky. He doesn't fit like the social norms. He seems to be maybe neurodivergent, but he's ostracized because he's different. He's the outsider. So that's a common element in Southern Gothic literature. Then you have the supernatural. Traditionally, supernatural will be like vampires, mysterious happenings, lights turning off and on, wind, all those things. In Southern Gothic, the supernatural is just something that's unexplained. It could be anything that just can't be explained naturally. And so it might be flawed characters, altered timelines, and it's might push you to reflect a little bit further. So supernatural is just something that we can't explain. Isolation, pretty straightforward. Alienating people from society. Why are they alienated? What does it tell us about that society? Are they losing their minds because they're so alienated? Could they have assimilated in, or did they do it to themselves? These are things to consider as you're looking at that isolation element in Southern Gothic. And then lastly, the heroine. The heroine is going to be a feminine character. In traditional traditional Gothic literature, she is the damsel in distress. She's the one who needs to be saved, who is being persecuted. Not in Southern Gothic. It's going to turn that on its head, and she ends up being a strong character sometimes, but she is going to be mentally unstable. So she might have the archetypal feminine qualities. She might be a damsel in distress who can save herself, but normally there's going to be some kind of mental instability or something else that makes her just not quite right, that's lurking beneath the surface that we have to be aware of. So all of these elements tie back to British Gothic literature that you may have experienced when we think about Gothic and horror stories, but in the Southern Gothic style, they're going to invert it a little bit. And as you read our short story, you'll see that pretty quickly, and you'll be able to track these through.